Kyomin pressed his long fingers against the cool metal wall of the research ship and felt the gentle vibration of the engines. The Harmony's Edge was his home among the stars, and he loved every quiet moment aboard her. The ship moved through space like a whisper, collecting data about distant worlds and mapping new trade routes for his people, the Veltai. His species had always been peaceful. They built beautiful cities of crystal and light, created amazing technology, and spent their time learning about the universe. War was something they read about in old books, not something they ever expected to face. Their ships carried no weapons because they never needed them. Everyone knew the Veltai were harmless scholars who helped anyone in need. That morning started like any other. Kyomin sat at his workstation, studying mineral readings from a nearby asteroid field. His captain, an elderly Veltai named Rilkas, hummed softly while reviewing navigation charts. The crew of 12 moved quietly through their daily tasks, their pale blue skin glowing softly in the ship's gentle lighting. "Kyomin," called Rilkas, "what do you think about those readings from Sector 7? The mineral composition looks unusual." Kyomin looked up from his screen, his large silver eyes reflecting the data streams. "Very unusual, Captain. I think we should take a closer look. This could be a new type of crystal formation." But before Rilkas could respond, the ship's warning system began to scream. Red lights flashed across every surface, and the gentle humming of the engines turned into a harsh whine. Kyomin had never heard these alarms before. In fact, most Veltai ships didn't even have them. "Unknown vessels approaching fast," shouted the communications officer. "They're not responding to our greeting signals." Through the main viewing screen, Kyomin saw them coming. 5 dark ships with sharp edges and glowing red engines. They looked nothing like the smooth, curved vessels his people built. These ships looked angry, like metal beasts hunting through space. "Keth Empire ships," whispered Rilkas, his face going even paler than usual. "Everyone, prepare for emergency procedures." Kyomin had heard stories about the Keth Empire, but they seemed like tales from another world. The Keth were brutal raiders who took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. They lived for war and conquest, the complete opposite of everything the Veltai believed in. The first energy blast hit the Harmony's Edge like a giant hammer. The ship shook so hard that Kyomin fell from his chair. Lights flickered and he could hear metal groaning under stress. The beautiful research vessel had never been designed to take this kind of punishment. "Shields failing," someone screamed. "We can't take another hit like that." "Send a distress signal," ordered Rilkas, but his voice was shaking. "Maybe someone will help us." Another blast hit them, and this time Kyomin heard something break deep inside the ship. The lights went out for a moment, then came back dimmer than before. The air started to smell of burning electronics and fear. "Captain, they're demanding we surrender," called the communications officer. "They want our cargo and our navigation data." "We're a research vessel," Rilkas replied. "We don't have cargo worth stealing." But Kyomin knew it didn't matter. He had heard the stories. The Keth didn't just want cargo. They wanted to hurt people. They enjoyed causing pain and fear. Some said they kept prisoners as slaves, working them to death in their mines and factories. A third blast shook the ship so hard that panels fell from the ceiling. Kyomin could hear his crewmates crying out in terror. These gentle scientists and explorers had never faced violence before. They didn't know how to fight back because they had never needed to learn. "Emergency pods," shouted Rilkas. "Everyone to the emergency pods, now!" Kyomin ran through the tilting corridors as the ship continued to shake around him. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of destruction as the Keth raiders tore his home apart. The beautiful research labs, the quiet living quarters, the peaceful observation decks. Everything was being destroyed by beings who loved violence more than life itself. He reached the emergency pod bay, just as another massive explosion rocked the ship. The lights went out completely this time, and emergency power bathed everything in a sick red glow. Around him, his crewmates were climbing into the small escape pods, their faces filled with terror. "Kyomin, this way," called someone, but he couldn't see who in the darkness and confusion. He stumbled toward the nearest pod and threw himself inside just as the ship's hull began to crack open like an egg. The pod launched automatically, throwing him back against the padded walls. Through the small window, he watched the Harmony's Edge break apart in a ball of fire and twisted metal. Pieces of his home scattered in all directions, glowing like sad stars against the black of space. He tried to contact the other pods, but his communication system crackled with static. Either the other pods were too damaged to respond, or he was already too far away to reach them. The pod's computer showed him drifting away from the wreckage at high speed, carried by the explosion's force toward the empty space between star systems. Hours passed in silence. Kyo-min sat in the tiny pod, surrounded by flashing warning lights that told him everything was broken. His life support system was damaged. His food supplies were limited. His engines were dead. Worst of all, his distress beacon had very little power left. He was alone in the vast darkness of space, farther from help than any Veltai had ever been. His people lived in the inner systems, surrounded by friends and allies. Out here in the deep black between the stars, there was nothing but emptiness and cold. Days turned into weeks. Kyo-min rationed his food and water, but he knew it wouldn't last much longer. The pod grew colder each day as the heating system struggled to work with damaged power cells. He wrapped himself in emergency blankets and tried not to think about dying alone in the dark. Sometimes he saw other ships passing in the distance, but they were too far away to see his tiny pod. His weak distress signal couldn't reach them. He was invisible, a tiny speck of metal drifting through an ocean of stars, slowly running out of time. On the 21st day, as Kyo-min sat staring out at the endless black, he began to accept that he would never see home again. The sound that woke Kyo-min was unlike anything he had ever heard before. It was deep and powerful, like metal singing in a voice that shook his tiny pod. After 3 weeks of silence, any sound seemed impossibly loud. Through his pod's small window, he saw a ship approaching. But this vessel looked nothing like the elegant curves of Veltai design or the sharp angles of Keth warships. It was massive and blocky, covered in thick armor plates and strange markings. Pipes and cables ran across its hull like metal veins, and it moved through space. With the steady purpose of something that had seen many battles, the ship's hull was painted in dull colors, gray and brown and dark green, as if it wanted to blend into the darkness of space. Large letters spelled out words in a language Kyo-min didn't recognize. Iron Will. The name seemed to fit the ship perfectly. Unknown pod. "This is Captain Dong-ho of the cargo vessel Iron Will," came a voice through his communications system. The translator in his pod worked hard to make sense of the strange language. "We have detected your distress signal. Are you in need of assistance?" Kyo-min's hands shook as he reached for the communication controls. After weeks of silence, hearing another voice felt like a miracle. But fear held him back. These beings were completely unknown to him. What if they were worse than the Keth raiders? I am Kyo-min of the research vessel Harmony's Edge," he finally managed to say. "My ship was destroyed. I have been drifting for many days." "Understood," replied the voice. "We're bringing you aboard. Try to stay calm." A metal arm extended from the alien ship and grabbed his pod with surprising gentleness. Kyo-min felt himself being pulled toward a large opening in the ship's side. The arm moved carefully, as if whoever controlled it understood how fragile his pod had become. Inside the ship's bay, Kyo-min saw beings moving around in heavy work clothes. They were shorter and wider than his people, with thick muscles and skin in various shades of brown and pink. Their faces looked hard, with small eyes and strong jaws. Everything about them seemed built for surviving difficult times. The airlock cycled, and Kyo-min's pod was opened by a female with short black hair and steady hands. She wore a blue uniform with medical symbols on it, and her movements were quick but careful. "I'm Tae-jin, the ship's medical officer," she said, her voice gentler than her appearance suggested. "Can you walk or do you need help?" Kyo-min tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't hold him. 3 weeks in the tiny pod had left his muscles weak, and fear made his hands shake. Tae-jin caught him before he could fall, supporting his weight easily despite being smaller than him. "It's okay," she said. "You're safe now. Let's get you to the medical bay." The corridors of the human ship were nothing like the quiet halls of Veltai vessels. Everything was functional and strong, built to last through hardship. The walls were thick metal covered with pipes and cables. The air smelled of machine oil and something else, something alive and energetic that Kyo-min couldn't identify. Other crew members stopped to look at him as Tae-jin helped him walk. Their faces showed curiosity but no hostility. One of them, a large male with graying hair, nodded respectfully as they passed. "That's Captain Dong-ho," Tae-jin explained. "He's the one who found you. He'll want to talk with you later, but first we need to make sure you're healthy." The medical bay was clean and well organized, though the equipment looked different from anything Kyo-min knew. Tae-jin helped him onto an examination table and began running various scanners over his body. "You're suffering from malnutrition and muscle weakness," she said, studying the results. "When did you last eat?" 2 days ago, Kyo-min admitted. "I was trying to make the food last longer." Tae-jin frowned and immediately prepared a medical feeding solution. "You should have been eating regularly. Your body can't survive on nothing." As she worked, Kyo-min studied her movements. Everything she did was efficient and purposeful, but there was also kindness in the way she treated him. Despite her tough appearance, she was genuinely concerned about his well-being. "What species are you?" he finally asked. "We're called humans," Tae-jin replied, checking his vital signs. "I'm guessing you've never met any of us before." "Never," Kyo-min confirmed. Are you warriors?" Tae-jin paused in her work and looked at him with what might have been amusement. "Some of us are, but mostly we're just trying to make a living hauling cargo from one system to another. We're not looking for fights, but we're not afraid of them either." The door to the medical bay opened and Captain Dong-ho entered. He was a stocky man with weathered skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His presence filled the room with quiet authority. "How's our guest doing, Tae-jin?" he asked. "He'll be fine with rest and proper food," she replied. "But he's been through a lot." Dong-ho turned to Kyo-min and there was genuine concern in his expression. "What happened to your ship?" "Keth raiders," Kyo-min said, and he saw the captain's face harden. "They destroyed everything. I think I'm the only one who escaped." "The Keth," Dong-ho said, and there was anger in his voice. "We've had run-ins with them before. They're bullies who pick on anyone who can't fight back." "My people don't fight," Kyo-min explained. "We're researchers and explorers. We've never needed weapons. Until now," Dong-ho said quietly. Then his expression softened. "But you don't need to worry about that right now. You're safe here. We'll take care of you." Over the next few hours, Kyo-min met more of the crew. There was Bo-ra, the chief engineer, a woman with strong hands and oil-stained clothes who spoke with enthusiasm about making broken things work again. And Hye-jin, the security chief, a quiet woman with alert eyes who carried herself like someone always ready for trouble. All of them treated Kyo-min with a mixture of curiosity and kindness that surprised him. Despite their intimidating appearance and the obvious military background of their ship, they went out of their way to make him comfortable. As night fell aboard the Iron Will, Kyo-min lay in a small but comfortable guest cabin, thinking about these strange beings called humans. They looked like warriors, but they had rescued him without asking for anything in return. Their ship was built for battle, but they used it to carry cargo and help stranded travelers. For the first time in weeks, Kyo-min felt safe. But he also felt confused. These humans were nothing like what he had expected to find in the dark spaces between the stars. Days passed aboard the Iron Will, and Kyo-min began to understand that humans were not what they appeared to be. On the surface, they looked like dangerous warriors with their thick muscles, scarred skin, and practical weapons always within reach. But the more time he spent with them, the more he saw something else entirely. It started with small things. When Kyo-min's damaged pod was brought into the ship's workshop, Bo-ra spent hours carefully removing his personal belongings and cleaning them. She didn't need to do this. The pod was worthless scrap metal, but she understood that these items were all Kyo-min had left of his old life. "This looks important," she said, holding up a small crystal device that stored his research notes. The crystal was cracked and dark, apparently ruined. "I think I can fix it." Kyo-min looked at the broken crystal and felt his heart sink. "It's damaged beyond repair. Even our best technicians couldn't fix something like that." Bo-ra smiled and adjusted her work light. "Maybe your technicians never learned to think like humans." For 2 days, she worked on the crystal using methods that made Kyo-min's advanced education seem useless. Instead of precise replacement parts, she used pieces of wire and metal salvaged from other broken devices. Instead of perfect laboratory conditions, she worked in a noisy workshop while drinking coffee and humming old songs. "Your people probably throw things away when they break," Bo-ra said, carefully welding a new connection inside the crystal. "Humans fix things. We have to. We can't afford to replace everything every time something goes wrong." When she powered up the crystal, it glowed with soft blue light, and all of Kyo-min's research data appeared perfectly intact. He stared at it in amazement. "How did you do that?" "Your technology is centuries behind ours." Bo-ra laughed and wiped oil from her hands. Technology isn't just about having the newest parts. It's about understanding how things work and refusing to give up when they break. Similar lessons came from the other crew members. When Kyomin mentioned that he was worried about his family not knowing what happened to him, Tae-jin immediately began working on a way to send a message across the vast distances to Veltai space. It's impossible, Kyomin explained. The distance is too great and we don't have the right equipment. Impossible is just a word, Tae-jin replied, connecting cables between different systems. Watch. Using the ship's cargo scanners, the navigation computer, and parts from 3 different communication devices, she built something that shouldn't have worked. But when she activated it, a message pulse shot out toward Veltai space, carrying news that Kyomin was alive. It might take months to reach them, she admitted, but it will get there. Captain Dong-ho taught him other lessons without meaning to. When the ship's food recycler broke down, threatening to leave them all hungry, Dong-ho didn't panic or search for the nearest station to buy a replacement. Instead, he gathered the crew and calmly explained what needed to be done. We have 3 days of emergency rations, he said. Bora, how long to fix the recycler? 4 days, maybe 5 if we're unlucky. Then we eat smaller portions and work faster. Haejin, check the cargo holds for anything we can eat safely. Tae-jin, make sure everyone stays healthy. Kyomin, you know systems design. Help Bora figure out what went wrong. There was no arguing, no complaints, no panic. The crew simply accepted the challenge and worked together to solve it. Within 3 days, they had the recycler working better than before. Your people would handle this differently? Dong-ho asked Kyomin later. We would send a distress signal and wait for rescue, Kyomin admitted. Or we would go to the nearest station and buy new parts. What if there was no one to rescue you? What if you were too far from any station? Kyomin thought about this. I don't know. That situation would never happen to us. It happens to humans all the time, Dong-ho said. So we learn not to depend on rescue. We learn to rescue ourselves. The biggest lesson came from Haejin during what she called basic training. When she learned that Kyomin had never defended himself against anything more dangerous than a laboratory accident, she insisted on teaching him some simple fighting techniques. I'm not a warrior, Kyomin protested. My people don't fight. Your people also don't get attacked by Keth raiders, Haejin replied. But you did. What will you do if it happens again? I'll hope someone rescues me. Haejin shook her head. Hope is good, but hope with a plan is better. And hope with a plan and the ability to defend yourself is best of all. The training was difficult and embarrassing. Kyomin was weak and slow compared to humans. But Haejin was patient, showing him how to use his longer reach and quick reflexes to his advantage. More importantly, she taught him something his people had never learned. Fighting isn't about being the strongest or the fastest, she explained. It's about refusing to give up. It's about deciding that some things are worth protecting, even if protecting them is dangerous. What if the other person is stronger? Then you be smarter. What if they're smarter? Then you be more determined. What if they're better in every way? Then you find friends who will help you. As the weeks passed, Kyomin began to see that humanity's real strength wasn't their technology or their muscles. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat. When something broke, they fixed it. When something seemed impossible, they found a way. When they were outnumbered or outgunned, they fought anyway. One evening, as he sat in the ship's small recreation area, Kyomin watched the crew relaxing after their duties. Dong-ho and Bora were playing a card game and arguing good-naturedly about the rules. Tae-jin was reading a book while Haejin maintained her equipment nearby. They looked so normal, so peaceful. But Kyomin had learned that beneath their calm exterior was something his advanced. Peaceful species had never developed. The iron determination to face any challenge and never, ever surrender. You're thinking very seriously about something, observed Dong-ho, looking up from his cards. I'm thinking about courage, Kyomin replied. My people always thought courage meant exploring new worlds and asking difficult questions. But you have a different kind of courage, and what kind is that? The courage to fight when fighting is necessary. The courage to protect others even when it's dangerous. The courage to never give up no matter how bad things get. Dong-ho smiled. Those aren't different kinds of courage. They're the same courage applied to different problems. You had the courage to survive alone in space for 3 weeks. That's the same spirit, just pointed in a different direction. But as Kyomin went to sleep that night, he wondered if Dong-ho was right. Did he really have that kind of courage, or had he simply been too afraid to die? Soon he would find out. The decision to hunt the Keth raiders came naturally, as if it had been inevitable from the moment Kyo-min told his story. Captain Dong-ho announced it during their morning meeting, his voice calm but determined. "We're changing course," he said, looking at each crew member in turn. "Instead of heading to the Proxima station, we're going after the raiders who destroyed Kyo-min's ship." Kyo-min felt his stomach drop. "Captain, you don't need to do that for me. I'm grateful for your rescue, but I don't want you to risk your lives." "This isn't just for you," Bora said, adjusting her work gloves. "The Keth have been hitting cargo ships and research vessels for months. They're getting bolder, coming deeper into peaceful space. Someone needs to stop them," added Hyejin. "And we're someone." Taejin nodded agreement. "Besides, you know their tactics and their technology. With your help, we might actually have a chance." Kyo-min stared at them in amazement. These humans were willing to fight a battle that wasn't theirs, against enemies who outnumbered them for people they barely knew. It was either the bravest thing he had ever seen or the most foolish. "The Iron Will isn't a warship," he pointed out. "You carry cargo, not weapons." "Every ship is a warship if you're creative enough," Dong-ho replied with a slight smile. "Bora, start making a list of what we can use. Taejin, check our medical supplies. We might need them. Hyejin, inventory the weapons we do have." "What about me?" asked Kyo-min. "You know the Keth better than any of us," said the captain. "Tell us everything you can remember about their ships, their weapons, their tactics." Over the next few days, Kyo-min watched in fascination as the humans transformed their peaceful cargo vessel into something deadly. They approached the task with the same practical creativity they applied to everything else. Bora removed the protective panels from the ship's hull and replaced them with salvaged armor plating from their cargo hold. The armor wasn't designed for space combat, but she welded it in place anyway, creating overlapping layers that might stop enemy fire. "It's not perfect," she admitted, wiping sweat from her forehead, "but it's better than nothing. And nothing is what we had before." Hyejin converted their mining charges into improvised torpedoes, while Taejin modified the ship's medical scanner to track enemy vessels. Every piece of equipment found a new purpose in their hands. The most impressive transformation was in the cargo bay itself. Dong-ho and Bora built launch tubes using industrial piping, creating a way to fire their improvised weapons at attacking ships. They installed manual controls and backup systems, assuming that their main computers would be destroyed in the fighting. "Your people would probably design everything perfectly before starting," Bora said to Kyo-min as they worked together on a targeting system. "Humans don't have time for perfect. We build something that works, then make it better while we're using it." Kyo-min found himself contributing in ways he never expected. His knowledge of Veltai technology allowed him to boost the ship's shields and improve their sensor range. His understanding of Keth tactics helped them plan their approach. "They'll try to surround us," he explained, drawing diagrams on a tablet. "Keth ships are fast but not very tough. They rely on overwhelming their targets with numbers and firepower, so we don't let them surround us," said Hyejin. "We stay mobile, hit them hard, and get out before they can coordinate. But there will be at least 5 ships, maybe more." "How can we fight that many?" "The same way humans have always fought when outnumbered," replied Dong-ho. "We cheat." As they worked, Kyo-min learned more about his rescuers. Dong-ho had been a military captain before becoming a cargo hauler. Bora had served as a combat engineer. Taejin was a former military medic, and Hyejin had been a special forces operative. "Why did you leave the military?" Kyo-min asked. "Got tired of fighting other people's wars," Dong-ho replied. "Thought civilian life would be more peaceful. But you're fighting now. This is different. This is our choice, our fight. We're not following orders from people who don't understand the situation. We're doing what needs to be done." 3 days after beginning their preparations, they reached the asteroid field where intelligence reports suggested the Keth had built a hidden base. The Iron Will drifted quietly between the floating rocks, using passive sensors to avoid detection. "There," whispered Hyejin, pointing at her display. 5 ships docked to that large asteroid. Looks like they're using it as a refueling station." Kyo-min studied the enemy vessels through the ship's telescope. They were the same sharp-edged predators that had destroyed his home, painted in the dark red colors of the Keth Empire. Just seeing them brought back memories of helplessness and terror. "Are you okay?" asked Taejin, noticing his distress. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Last time I saw those ships, everyone I knew died." "Fear is normal," said Dong-ho. "The question is what you do with it. Do you let it control you, or do you use it to make yourself stronger?" How do I use it? Remember why you're afraid. Remember what they did to your friends. Then decide whether you want to let them do it to someone else. Kyomin thought about his crewmates aboard the Harmony's Edge, gentle scientists who had never hurt anyone, killed simply because they couldn't defend themselves. He thought about other research ships and cargo vessels, other peaceful people who might face the same fate. I want to stop them, he said quietly. Then we will, replied Dongho. Bora, are the weapons ready? Ready as they'll ever be, she confirmed. Though I still say this is crazy. Crazy enough to work, added Hyejin, checking her targeting computer one final time. As the Iron Will moved into position for their attack, Kyomin realized something had changed inside him. The frightened refugee who had drifted helplessly in space was still there, but he was no longer in control. Something stronger had taken his place, something that had learned from humans that some things were worth fighting for. Approaching attack position, announced Dongho. Everyone ready? Around him, Kyomin saw the faces of people who had chosen to risk everything for strangers. They were scared too, he realized, but they were doing it anyway. That was what courage really meant, not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. I'm ready, he said, and meant it. The battle began with silence. The Iron Will drifted through the asteroid field like just another piece of space debris, her engines cold and her weapons hidden. The Keth base sprawled across a massive asteroid, its docking arms reaching out like hungry claws. 5 raider ships hung there like sleeping predators refueling after their latest attacks. Remember, Dongho whispered into his comm, we get one chance at surprise. Make it count. Kyomin sat at his jury-rigged targeting station, his hands steady despite the fear racing through his body. Weeks of training with the humans had changed him. He was still the same peaceful Veltai scientist. But now he carried something new inside him. The understanding that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Weapons ready, reported Bora from the improvised torpedo. Tubes, shields at maximum, added Taejin from her position at the modified medical scanner. Target. Locks confirmed, said Hyejin, her fingers dancing across her targeting computer. The Iron Will suddenly roared to life. Her engines blazed, her weapons powered up, and she accelerated toward the Keith base like an arrow shot from a bow. The element of surprise was everything in this fight. Without it, they would be overwhelmed in minutes. Their first salvo of improvised torpedoes struck the docked raider ships before the Keth even knew they were under attack. 2 ships exploded instantly, their hulls cracking open like eggs. A third ship was badly damaged, its engines dead and atmosphere venting into space. Direct hits, shouted Bora. 3 down, 2 to go. But the surviving Keth ships were already moving. Alarm screamed across the base as the raiders scrambled to respond to this impossible attack. Who would dare assault a Keth stronghold with a single cargo ship? Here they come, warned Hyejin as the 2 remaining ships launched from the asteroid base. And they're angry. The Keth vessels were sleek and fast, built for hunting down fleeing prey. They split apart to attack from different angles, their plasma cannons already charging for battle. Against any normal cargo ship, this would have been the end of the fight. But the Iron Will was no longer a normal cargo ship. Bora's armor modifications deflected the first enemy shots, sending superheated plasma streaming harmlessly into space. Dongho threw the ship into a spinning dive that would have torn apart most civilian vessels, but his military-grade modifications held strong. Kyomin. Now, shouted the captain. This was the moment they had planned for. Using his knowledge of Keth technology and his understanding of Veltai systems, Kyomin activated a device they had built together, a combination of human ingenuity and alien science that created a focused electromagnetic pulse, and the pulse struck the leading Keth ship and overloaded its shields instantly. For a few crucial seconds, the raider was defenseless. Target locked, called Hyejin. Fire everything, ordered Dongho. The Iron Will unleashed every weapon they had built. Mining charges converted to torpedoes, industrial cutting lasers repurposed as beam weapons, even containers of toxic cargo fired like giant bullets. The defenseless Keth ship disappeared in a ball of fire and wreckage. One left, said Taejin, tracking the final enemy on her sensors. But the last Keth ship was the largest and most dangerous. Its captain had seen his entire squadron destroyed by a single human vessel, and he was furious. The ship came at them head-on, all weapons firing, determined to ram them if necessary. He's not trying to capture us, observed Hyejin. He wants us dead. Then we'll have to disappoint him, replied Dong Ho, pushing the ship into another impossible maneuver. The final battle was fought among the asteroids, two ships dancing a deadly dance around floating mountains of rock and ice. The Keth ship was faster, but Dong Ho knew how to use the terrain to his advantage. He led the raider through a maze of spinning asteroids, forcing the enemy pilot to choose between losing his target or crashing into solid rock. "Bo-Ra, can you give me more power to the engines?" called the captain. "Not without shutting down our shields," she replied. "Do it. Captain, if they hit us without shields, we're dead. If they catch us, we're dead anyway. Trust me." Bo-Ra rerouted power from their defensive systems to the engines, and the Iron Will shot forward like a missile. They raced through a gap between two asteroids so narrow that their hull scraped against both sides, sparks flying in their wake. The Keth ship followed, but it was slightly wider than the human vessel. Metal screamed against rock as the raider forced its way through the gap, its hull tearing and its weapon systems damaged. On the far side of the asteroids, Dong Ho brought the ship around in a tight turn that pushed everyone against their restraints. They came up behind the damaged Keth vessel just as its shields failed completely. "All weapons fire at will," ordered the captain. This time, Kyomin didn't hesitate. His finger pressed the firing control, and their last torpedo struck the Keth ship's engine section. The raider exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire asteroid field. For a moment, there was absolute silence aboard the Iron Will. Then Bo-Ra began to laugh, a sound of pure relief and amazement. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "Damage report," requested Dong Ho, though he was smiling too. "Hull breaches on decks 2 and 4, but nothing critical," reported Tae-Jin. "All crew members are alive and functional." "What about the base?" asked Kyomin. Hyejin checked her sensors. "No signs of life. Looks like all the raiders were on those 5 ships." As they surveyed the wreckage of their victory, Kyomin felt something he had never experienced before. It wasn't the quiet satisfaction of solving a research problem, or the gentle pleasure of discovering something new. This was fiercer and more immediate, the knowledge that he had faced his greatest fear and conquered it. "How do you feel?" asked Tae-Jin, checking his vital signs. "Different," he replied honestly. "Stronger. Like I'm not the same person who drifted helplessly in that escape pod." "You're not," said Dong Ho. "That person was a victim. This person is someone who fights back." Over the following days, as they repaired their ship and sent word of their victory to the local authorities, Kyomin made a decision that surprised even him. "I want to stay with you," he told the crew. "I don't want to go home." "Why not?" asked Bo-Ra. "Your people are probably worried about you. My people are safe in their inner systems, protected by distance and diplomacy. But out here in the space between the stars, there are others who need protection. People like me who never learned how to fight for themselves." "It's dangerous work," warned Hyejin. "I know, but I've learned something from you. I've learned that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. And I've learned that strength isn't just about having better weapons or thicker armor." "What is it about?" asked Dong Ho. "It's about deciding that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. It's about refusing to give up, even when everything seems hopeless. It's about standing together against the darkness." The captain nodded slowly. "Those are human values you're talking about? Maybe. Or maybe they're just the values of anyone who chooses to be more than a victim, as..." The Iron Will turned toward the shipping lanes where other cargo vessels traveled. Kyomin began composing a message to send home. He would tell his people about humans, about their courage, their determination, and their absolute refusal to surrender in the face of evil. He would tell them that the galaxy was bigger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined, but also that it contained wonders they had never dreamed of. He would explain that there were beings out here who measured their worth not by their technology or their comfort, but by their willingness to sacrifice for others. Most importantly, he would tell them that sometimes the most advanced species could learn the most valuable lessons from those they considered primitive. The humans had rescued him from the emptiness of space, but they had given him something far more precious than his life. They had given him the courage to rescue others. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its mixed crew toward whatever challenges awaited, Kyomin smiled and settled into his new life. He was no longer lost alone in space. He had found his home among the stars, with beings who had taught him that the universe belonged to those brave enough to defend it.